We're here at VCC Clark Station, the last stop of the Millennium Line. It's actually quite an abrupt and awkward ending to the Millennium Line because there really isn't much around here. And it leaves a big gap between here and the Canada Line. It's only about 2 kilometers, and there really isn't any option but to extend it to Cambie. It's the only natural extension, so the question is, how do we extend it? What route should it take to Cambie and beyond?
We know that Broadway won't work. And south of Broadway is too far and won't connect to the Canada Line. So the only real option is north of Broadway. Let's take a look. First, you start at Commercial Broadway. You make your way to VCC Clark Station. And the red line here means it's above ground. So you go along the rail tracks, and then you reach Thornton Avenue and you turn, and here you go underground. So you go up the hill, and this green line means cut and cover, and you go past Great Northern Way, and you make it to 5th Avenue. You go along 5th Avenue past Main Street and to the first station, Ontario Street. Let's do that again. VCC Clark Station. Along the railway tracks. Up Thornton Avenue. Up the hill, going underground. Past Great Northern Way. Towards 5th Street. And down 5th Street towards Main Street.
Here at 5th Street and Ontario is where the first station would be located.
So the new Ontario Street station would be 1 block from Main Street between Ontario and Quebec Street. But let's explore why we should use 5th Street instead of Broadway. First, there's much less traffic on 5th Street, so any disruptions would be minimal. But more importantly, there aren't as many storefront businesses on 5th Street, and the businesses that are on 5th Street don't have large storefronts, and many even have signs that tell people to use their back alley. So the disruption on business wouldn't be very big. And now as you approach the end of 5th Street, we intersect with the Canada Line at Olympic Village Station. And here at Olympic Village, there are already a few buildings and stores. But most significantly, there's also a lot of open space that can be used for growth and future development. Now let's take a look at the route after Olympic Village. So the skytrain would run cut and cover until Olympic Village, and then here you would go above ground. It would go a bit along 6th Avenue, and then it would go along the railway tracks. And these railway tracks used to run the Olympic streetcar when the Olympics were being held, and now they're sitting unused. And then near the end of the railway, it goes back onto 6th Avenue, goes under Granville Park, under Granville Bridge, and then comes out onto its next station, Furr Street Station. Let's take a look. Olympic Village Station. Along 6th Street. Along the railroad tracks. back on 6th Street. Under Granville Park. And to Fur and 6th Street.
The next SkyTrain station would go here, at Fur and 6th Street. Right here, there are already a few buildings around me. It's also just a few minutes from Granville Island, and geographically, the station would be located just 2 blocks from 4th Avenue, and right beside the Granville Bridge. So, connections to UBC or to downtown would be really easy and quick. Here we're walking on the Arbutus Corridor, the railroad tracks, currently owned by Canadian Pacific Railway, and this is right beside 6th Avenue. As you can see, there's a lot of space here for the SkyTrain to run above ground. So currently these tracks aren't being used by CP Rail. They stopped running trains into downtown many years ago, and now they're sitting unused. And the city of Vancouver recently tried to purchase them. It would be a very natural connection for SkyTrain to run along this corridor. There used to already be trains that ran here. So as we walk westward towards UBC, you see that these train tracks are turning left towards Broadway, and they'll actually meet up right at Arbutus and Broadway, which is where the SkyTrain would terminate. So because trains used to run along these railroad tracks, there's more than enough room for SkyTrain to run without affecting the people who live around here. So we're approaching Broadway and Arbutus, and you see right behind me is Broadway Street. So here we are, we've arrived at Arbutus and Broadway. So ideally the SkyTrain would terminate here, as there's a lot of open space for there to be a station to be constructed here. And when the Millennium Line terminates here, people would be able to transfer to the 99B line bus to continue UBC, or the 16 bus to continue along Arbutus Street.
What would this cost? 3.1 kilometers of above ground would cost $212 million, and 2.4 kilometers of cut and cover would cost $262 million, for a total of $474 million. To put this in perspective, this is less than 1/4 of the cost of building SkyTrain on Broadway. How long would this take? The trip from Commercial to Canby would be reduced from 12 minutes to 6 minutes. And from Commercial to Arbutus, what currently takes 90 minutes would take just 10 minutes.
So we're here at Canby and 7th Street, and this neighborhood is very much a mixed-use, mid-rise community. Right behind me you see one building that's 7 stories high. Right across the street is one building that is 4 stories high with commercial on the bottom. So right across the street you have another building that's 7 stories high with commercial on the bottom. So right across the street you have a 6-story building with commercial on the bottom. Okay, here in Yaletown, this one's 7 stories high, and there's one right there that's 6 stories high. A little further down, that building is 5 stories high. That one is also 5 stories high. And notice how there's commercial on the first floor of all the buildings here. And that building right there is 7 stories high. On top you have people living, and on the bottom you have commercial. So the point I'm trying to get across by showing you all these buildings is that mid-rise mixed use isn't that far-fetched at all. Vancouver has a lot of mid-rise mixed-use buildings. So building an entire community of mixed-rise, mixed-use is actually not far from what we already have right now in Vancouver.
I'm sure you figured out by now that the point of having SkyTrain on 5th Avenue is to allow for a transit-oriented, mixed-use, mid-rise neighborhood to sprout up. Because right now, the neighborhood looks like this. It's mostly 1 or 2 story buildings with a wide road, not much density, and quite a few parking lots. And if we turn it into a mid-rise community, it would look more like this. There would be more density and more people walking. There would be more business, and it would be more sustainable and livable.
So here on 5th Street, you would have SkyTrain running below me. And above ground, buildings would be no higher than 7 stories high, with the first floor being office space, commercial space, or some other use other than residential. I'm not saying that you should tear down all these buildings and replace them all with mid-rise development. For example, right behind me, you have light industry, like a metal finishing company. So these businesses are good, they provide jobs. You can even have these buildings right across the street from a child care center or a few homes. But what I am saying is that this community is a decaying one. It has a lot of for lease signs and empty parking lots, and it's only a few minutes away from downtown, yet it's stuck with zoning laws from the 1960s. Zoning laws that prohibit development that Vancouver desperately needs.
Here you can see how the zoning maps have changed over time. And really they haven't changed. This area south of Falls Creek has remained light industrial for the past 50 years, even though Vancouver's population has more than doubled. If we take a closer look at the zoning laws, we see that this area is zoned I-1. So this zoning district says the tentative schedule is to permit light industrial uses that are generally compatible with one another and with adjoining residential or commercial districts. In other words, it means this would allow all these types of manufacturing, allow for parking, but most importantly, the only dwelling uses it would allow is if it's essential to business. So in other words, nobody's allowed to live in the area. But just a few blocks away you see a different zoning for a commercial district. And this is where we saw all the mixed-use mid-rise buildings. So let's see how this is zoned. So this zoning district says the intent of this schedule is to provide a wide range of goods and services to maintain commercial activities, specialized services, and some light manufacturing enterprises for preserving the character and general amenity of this area and its immediate surroundings, and to provide for dwelling uses designed compatibly with commercial uses. This sounds very much like mixed use. This zoning district would still allow for light manufacturing, allows for retail and restaurants to open, but most importantly it allows for dwellings to be built. And not just any regular dwellings. It says no portion of the front story of the building to a depth of 10.7 meters from the front wall of the building and extending across its full width shall be used for residential purposes. And that's what we should aim to produce in this area here.
There's no reason why you can't have kitchen and bathroom shops under a mid-rise building. You already have a lot of office spaces like for Vancouver area. So why can't you build a mid-rise building instead of just this one-story flat building? You have to have more density. You might think that here at 5th Street, there's no development, there's no density, but isn't that the point? Because you have to have growth, you have to have development. That's the only reason you build SkyTrain, because you want to stimulate growth and help development and help the city develop into a transit-oriented, vibrant city so that the city not only becomes more livable, but becomes more sustainable and transit-friendly. In other words, you can have your manufacturing, you can have your commercial and your office space. And in fact, I encourage you to have more jobs, but that shouldn't restrict a community from rising up from here. It shouldn't restrict residential from being built. There's a reason there's so many empty parking lots and for these signs. Residential and commercial is like worms and compost. They're meant to go together. Having people live here encourages businesses to locate here, and business helps create a vibrant residential neighborhood.